is how I regard individuals, and not just limited to people. It also encompasses, where I live, the plants and animals, and even things that are inanimate, because these are extensions of God, in that He granted things to exist for a reason, for a purpose. And so it's my duty to show my reverence and appreciation to Him, and have the utmost respect as possible. In some contrast, though, I actually went through a lot of tests after I became Muslim. I became Muslim, as I said, at age 16. So there was at a point where I felt that there were some things that would automatically happen for me. Albeit I grew up in a household that was wholesome in one way, and another way it wasn't. I actually did not get along with my father. Me and him was always literally both verbally and physically battling one another. I was not necessarily at peace with myself, in that I had to put on, not necessarily a facade, because when I went to school was everything for me. It was social, it was networking, it was leisure, as well as I just love learning. So I did very well in high school. But once I became Muslim, it just seemed like more of the tests came. And of course that could be because the older I got, by default I would encounter more situations that otherwise I probably would not know how to handle, or would possibly prove to be struggling for many people. But for the most part, I had to really adapt to situations that otherwise I did not foresee, because I felt that, or at least I was taught that, if I did certain things to place myself along a certain path, then A, B, C, D, and etc. should follow. And if something didn't, then it's something that I went wrong with, and that's to some extent still true, but it never went too much extent to how do I move beyond that? How do I compensate for some flaw or some unforeseen circumstance that allowed me to be a stronger person, allow me to move forward? The bulk of such experiences happened while I was at college. The first year and a half of school, and I also went to UIC, was a gratifying experience for me. I was not aware of the MSA, let alone that Friday prayers occurred there. I found that out by accident. I was not aware to a great extent how I should learn about how to pray, how to read Quran, certain concepts. It was rather delayed until I got to UIC and met individuals. There was a lot of things that just went where I thought it was, okay, well, why I'm Muslim. It wasn't to the point that I questioned the legitimacy of Islam, but to the point where I felt that I was no longer worthy to be a part of this way of life, this deen. So I actually, there was a point where I had an opportunity to transfer, go to a better school. That didn't happen. Family situations occurred. I had to take on more responsibilities, and then it just kind of went off from there. And one of the things I had to slowly come to learn was that test, things where you have to struggle with, that does not necessarily provide an instant solution or even understanding from other individuals, would be experiences that one would make me stronger in my faith, and have me to learn lessons that would definitely, inshallah, God wanted to set me forth later on in the future. So a huge part as well was for me to be considered a social person. I consider myself a loner at times, in that I'd rather bear the brunt of my own actions versus depend upon people. So I would rarely turn to people if I felt like I was in trouble for something or I needed help. I would try to exhaust all my resources and know-how before I would go to that. And what often happened for me was it came down to what to me would consider to be the last minute, but to me it was like I just wanted to be my own person in trying to do this. Islam had really humbled me. Not that I was vain or arrogant, but to the point where I had to come to learn, like, I cannot do everything on my own. There is a vast support system in faith, a vast support system in consciousness, and a vast support system in practicality on how I can live and grow as a better individual. In the midst of all those things, the one thing that did really kept me afloat was being involved with the community. There was nothing necessarily new with that while I was at college, or even before I got to college. I was very active growing up, and it kind of maintained that way, but it was a new way of looking. Just as if, like, I wasn't intolerant of other faiths, of other walks of life, I became more tolerant. I became more open and understanding, given my own battles that you cannot necessarily make the assumption that someone is destined for some place, or because someone's doing this or that in front of you, that, you know, it can be the same kind of doors, and vice versa. Ultimately, that I am not God, and I never want to be judged. I don't know how the person's outcome will be, but what my role can be is to be as best of a friend as possible, or at least someone trusting, so this person will not have to necessarily feel bad or go through some negative experience or what have you. Another thing that was really just astonishing to me was the constant reference to God's just omnipotence in how everything reflects Him. From something that Sister Hayes also mentioned, you know, when we say certain things, so instead of saying, hello, how are you, we, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, or instead of saying thank you, you know, you say jazakallah khair, you know, may God acknowledge, you know, it's always an acknowledgement that, you know, whatever that you do for me, I'm going to first ask that God and recognize this action that you've done, hopefully with the best of intentions. For me, that's just, it's something that moves me every time. Another aspect which I didn't really answer in the previous is also something that's really shared, and that is the concept of the Trinity and other observances within the Christian faith. I'm too a person to try to be a reason and logic. I coached debate, I was debating in high school, but all the time I was always an inquisitive person. So instead of accepting things as to what they're presented to me as to be, I want to know, I want to find out why. And if something is given to me, I want to be able to extract it and try to get an understanding how I can make the most use of, you know, this information that's given to me, or the situation at hand. So I, for whatever reasons, will come across things, and smallest of things, like, you know, noticing how a spider, I always remember this exactly, a spider come out of nowhere and decides to crawl onto my arm and decides to make a web, you know, instead of probably killing it, you know, and just really see, like, well, how did the spider crawls upon my hand and decides it's comfortable enough to start making a web in broad daylight. You know, little, what would seem really zany occurrences such as those that I would even happen to share at a public forum such as this is something that has me to be taken aback and really reflect on how God just allows things that we probably would not know is taken for granted, or just cast aside as being like His presence is always present.